There's not one right way to do it. There are a lot of consumer facing brands in many categories, and certainly in wellness and fitness and personal development, personal success, where I focus my energies. There are a lot of brands in those categories that don't necessarily have visible founders, even though they may have very substantial, very robust, and very committed communities. When there is a disproportionate presence of a founder, that can verge into what we might call a personal brand, where that company or that business is disproportionately dependent on the voice, on the presence, on the face of that founder. And that impede or even put a ceiling on growth, lessens valuation and sometimes can even make it hard to have a business that people are interested in buying.
Michael, welcome to the Live Your Truth Now podcast. How are you, my friend?
Hey, Mike, honored to be here. Honored to see you. Thank you.
Yeah, I've been running into you a lot lately, which coincides with us recording this beautiful interview and exploring really about relationships. You and I have had, I would say, a really amazing friendship over the last couple years and been honored to be a part of your community and circle. And one of the things that I have found from just our breakfasts we've done together and our run-ins at the local coffee shop and juice shop here in town is your emphasis on the building of relationships. And what I want to talk to you about today is your work with founders on the entrepreneurial front. As you know, most of the audience are entrepreneurs and they're looking for ways to build their business in the most authentic way possible and making authenticity be at the core of their success. And so I want to open up the conversation between us today with what you are currently seeing in your experience as an advisor to many health and wellness companies around the relationship that successful companies have with their customers and the difference between companies that don't end up making it. So
there's not one right way to do it. I don't think this is a matter of right. There are a lot of consumer facing brands in many categories, and certainly in wellness and fitness and personal development, personal success, where I focus my energies. There are a lot of brands in those categories that don't necessarily have visible founders, even though they may have very substantial, very robust, and very committed communities, customer communities, readerships, whatever the case may be. But to your excellent point, there are a lot of brands that have grown and continue to grow and accelerate because of the visibility and the vocal presence of a founder. We know, I'm sure I know it's familiar to you and likely to, each of you listening, that when there's a disproportionate presence of a founder, that can verge into what we might call a personal brand, where that company or that business is disproportionately dependent on the voice, on the presence, on the face, on the omnipresence of that founder. And that can actually impede or even put a ceiling on growth, and certainly lessens valuation and sometimes can even make it hard to have a business that people are interested in buying. But to the extent that the currency of success for most entrepreneurs is positive impact, regardless of the category, no matter what business people are in, they want to do a good job, have a good product, have a good service, deliver not just the usefulness or the utility or the efficacy of the product, but a great experience of doing business with their company. And there's really a distinction there of service and delivery time and even the effectiveness of the product and the experience and the emotional audit. What does it feel like to do business with this company, which is one of the biggest reasons customers return, is not just the effective product, but the feeling of how they're treated and what it feels like to do business with that company. So with respect to the visibility of the founder, the distinction I've made over the years, in advising, Dave Asprey when he was at Bulletproof in the first 5 or 6 years, many, many others, is this idea of positioning as compared to humanizing. And Positioning would be that latter frame that I described of the disproportionate presence of the founder, where the business is dependent on she or he. That would be positioning, and that converge on even a personal brand, even if the name of the company isn't that person's name. What I call humanizing is to, like what we did with Dave in the early days of Bulletproof and so many others, is to have that founder be not center stage, but side stage, present on the content platform, present in the about us origin story of the business, giving it soul, giving it purpose, giving it humanity, but still allowing the brand, the commercial brand, to expand and ascend to its fullest expression, to its fullest embrace by the community and ultimately the marketplace. So it's a fine line, and it's a nuance. It's a balance to strike. There isn't a set of things to do and a set of things not to do. But generally for the founder to be on the content platform, even to be the signature on a lot of the emails to customers, if not most, nothing wrong with that. That doesn't get in the way. It actually helps. And to have a voice on social. I think very simply, or at least to open the discussion, those are a few things to think about.
Vulnerability is something that's kind of come across my windshield in the last couple years. And that also is a fine line. It also can be thin ice as well. Some people don't really do a great job of distinguishing what vulnerability really is, because vulnerability can quickly turn into oversharing, which can also make you feel exposed and also make you feel like the relationship is compromised. And then you start internalizing, oh, I gave them too much. And then, we could go down that rabbit hole, right, of resentment, guilt, and shame that comes from the individual. In your experience investing in startups and founders, what is your advice on towing that line of vulnerability when it comes to building the company from a core aspect of the team and then also the relationship with the customer?
Love the question, Mike. So there's the investment piece, but if I could just roll back a little
Yeah, please.
on the subject of vulnerability, um, the founder's story, his or her origin story, his or her, how they first located their purpose or their mission. And you talk about oversharing. A lot of times, what happened in their life or what happened in the life of a loved one, something that they saw or noticed or experienced in their own life or the lives of the people around them, that becomes the foundation or the event where they located their purpose and said to themselves something along the lines of, I'll be darned if I'm going to let that happen to more people, or that happened to me, and I want to make sure that other people don't go through that, or if they do, they have a better experience. They're able to conceive a child, they're able to avoid migraine headaches, they're able to be a better parent, whatever that might be. And so that the aspect of their vulnerability that they share would generally connect to the value proposition or the promised outcome of the product or service. The overshare could be sharing all sorts of things from their life, and nothing wrong with vulnerability. Vulnerability and the willingness to be open is a strength. It's not a weak. It's not, by no means is that a weakness. Vulnerability as a definition almost means like an animal on its back is like vulnerable, meaning subject to injury or subject to domination or even subject to injury or death. Vulnerability as a conscious human and even as a founder is about strength. It's just about how much, what are you sharing from the 1,000 things you could share that's relevant to the promise of the business, right? Now moving on, thank you for allowing me to share that. And
I love the explanation in that too, Michael. I thought it was really, really well orchestrated, but yes, go on.
takes one to know one. Um, And with respect to investing, and this, I've had an awareness of this for a long time, but it was really articulated to me by a dear friend, Tim Chang, best known for his work over the years with Mayfield Fund. And he's really royalty in the VC world and a huge heart, very much about humanity over money, that kind of thing. And the vulnerability of the founder to his or her prospect population, his or her marketplace, in the way I just described. We know that that's meaningful. It brings voice, it brings humanity, credibility, purpose, all of those attributes. And then in terms of that founder, she or he looking to attract investors, whether they be angels, friends or family, certainly VCs or private equity. I learned from Tim, and there's still a lot of the investment community that needs to come over to this way of seeing things. But it's not just the business model; it's the founder. It's his or her heart, his or her purpose, and possibly most of all, his or her trauma work, because unhealed trauma shows up in the culture and the experience of that business, and sometimes even in the model itself. So, I think investors that are really looking, not just at the model, but at the founder, need to encounter vulnerability in that founder in terms of his or her willingness to share just what happened. How did you become the 25, 35, 45? It's not a matter of age. You could be 80, but we're all, 8 or 10 or 12-year-old little kids in these what look like grown-up bodies, going through life. And it's just one way to look at things. And, savvy investors, whether you're managing a fund or you're, you know, angel investing, or just a founder that occasionally invests in people, a lot of that happens as well. It's important to know not just the model, but the person, and you can't know them if they're not vulnerable. Their vulnerability is their self-knowledge, is the self-knowledge and the willingness to share it. So that if the market pushes back on your venture, which invariably it does in some way, or you need to pivot, what is it about you that helps me understand that you can make that pivot and not dig in your heels, stick with everything you thought it would be from the origin point? How are you going to adjust? How are you going to lead? How are you going to steer the ship, through some choppy waters? Because there will be some. There's no way there can't be.
There's also something that you said that I thought was really interesting is, the founder being the actual focal point of the company more so than the product or solution in itself. And I have noticed in my experience talking to my friends, folks like you, who have gone through either the investment side of raising capital for a company or have been on the outside and, being asked to invest capital into a venture. The common denominator in finding what companies make it and what companies don't is the founder. It's the genetic makeup, it's the personality makeup, and it really is a testament to a lot of what I'm seeing lately in not just the VC investing space, but also in the business landscape, where founders are starting to recognize that their own self-work and their own self-awareness and development is very key, and also a reflection of how the team runs, how the company runs, where your morals and values lie. And I want to segue into the community aspect, because over the last couple of years, I've also seen a massive emphasis for businesses to transition from this transactional relationship with customers. Keep your customers happy. The customer's always right. If the customer wants a refund, you just give them back the money, no questions asked. To that of a relational activity with the emphasis of being a part of a community. And I know health and wellness is one of those industries that's really I would say, at the forefront of focusing on community. Some of the companies that you have been associated with, like Athletic Greens, which is a massive sponsor in the podcasting space. And one of those companies, along with Bulletproof, they did a really great job, I think, of building the foundational aspect of making customers feel like they were part of a group or something bigger than themselves. Talk to me about that movement that's been happening. How do these companies move to the community aspect? And what does that mean for people going forward in terms of the business landscape? Do we all have to move towards more of a community aspect approach in order to thrive in business today?
First off, as usual, there's a nuance here. There's a little bit of or more than a little bit of a balancing act, because customers want to feel like they are in and receiving a personal relationship and a personal interaction. And so the community piece, of course, is that you're part of something. You're part of a group of people that are doing the same personal work, or using the same kind of nutritional protocol, or even a community that might even have a tribal sort of label to it, like CrossFit or biohackers or runners. Or the balancing act is to give people the experience of a personal relationship, but and bring in community, but not have them feel lost in the volume and the masses of that community. Because if you're in a stadium listening to a speaker, it's hard to feel like he or she are speaking to you when you're sitting there with 70,000 people. So it's a real balance between of that one-to-one brand voice and articulating the presence of a community, and not having me fall into it like a whirlpool or quicksand. And I'm like, wait a second, like, what happened to our one-to-one relationship? So managing both is it takes, there's an intricacy to the way a brand articulates itself on its website, in its customer communications, in its email, in its unboxing experience, in all of its, language-based assets, how it communicates. With that said, communities tend to congregate around the way people, if we even look in the world, there, spiritual and theological communities, of course, people that believe the same things about spirituality or God or the universe. People that are, all biohackers or committed to the same, vegetarians or carnivores, or, those kinds of labels tend to, people gather around those affinities, because it's good, it's good to know you're with people, even if you never meet them, even if you're all customers of a brand, and you never gather in person. You're part of the people that buy AG1. You're part of the people that wear an Oura ring. So there's a tribal connection, even in communities where you never meet one soul. And that gets fostered by the way in which the brand articulates itself, and the ability to strike that nuance between the one-to-one brand to customer or brand to customer voice, and other articulations, and also visuals that help people understand that there are others on this journey with them. And that you look, I think brands disproportionately rely on the social platforms to foster that, but in a very practical sense, social platforms are not the ultimate destination for where that relationship lives. Most of the time, if you're on a social platform belonging to a brand, where they really would rather have you is in their real living room, which is their website, enjoying or working with content that's native on their platform.
It's interesting from the content aspect, because you and I have had multiple conversations offline about tribalism We've also had conversations around storytelling as well and what's effective storytelling. As you know, it's one of my deep passions is about the architecture and the nature of the origin of a story and how it starts, the journey that it takes you on, and where do you end up going. And for companies, when they own the story or their story, the genesis, all the way to, the exodus, so to speak, right? Like the promised land or where they're going. I have found so much enraptured by the journey of where a company's going. I love the unfinished story. It's like, here's where we are, and this is where we're going. Would you like to be part of that? And even if it means you saw this, I think, with Tom's shoes, when Tom's came out, they did such a great job with their 1-for-1 model. And it was so great because you felt like you were contributing to a larger mission just buying a pair of Toms. Something that I want to extract from just your remarks that you had around storytelling and just really in just groups is companies get really, really honed in on story, but they are afraid to own that story. The social media platforms become this heavy anchor for them where they actually think it's like we have to be on there. And this is like what's required of us if we want to make it today becomes an anchor for them. I actually see social media for a lot of companies when it comes to storytelling as a weight because they rely on it so much to tell every single day. We have to tell people who we are, what we do, and why we do it. And I want to talk about storytelling in the digital age. It's much different. It's become more competitive. And I think a lot of people are operating out of fear to tell their story rather than empowerment. What are your thoughts on that?
There may be founders that are concerned that their story could in some way diminish or take the shine off the business. If that's the case, I haven't encountered it. Just acknowledging that. I think what I've encountered are just founders that don't want any part of the spotlight, you know, and they're winning, and you don't know when you're winning if allowing yourself to be even peripherally visible could take the game higher or have the home run be bigger. But you can't know the impact of things you choose not to do. If you don't take that swing, you don't then it's not happening. Here's the other thing, Mike, about whether it's storytelling or even other kinds of things you might do, like have a very caring customer support group, or really study aspects of hospitality, which I do, and bring them into e-commerce businesses, not having any obvious connection to restaurants or hotels or things we would think of as hospitality. When they're done as a tactical strategy, because a brand or a company is, we want warmer relationships or we want to extend lifetime value, so let's do these following things. And that's fine. And it's better than not doing it generally if it's done with sensitivity. But at the same time, if the kinds of things that give customers an experience of really being cared about or being shared with, in the case of being the recipient of a story, when it's done authentically, because it really resonates and originates in the founder's heart, her or his heart, that's when it actually connects. And, this is not a metaphysical discussion, but nonetheless, the energy of words and intention that originate with the founder have an impact. And I've never seen it not be the case. Never seen it not be the case. And this is any category. It could be health, wellness, tires, bird cages, snow shovels. For you listening, this is for you. It's for you, the person in your seat listening to this right now, regardless of category. There's a caring aspect. If we really look, there's a reason why each of us get into the business and the category and right down to the product or suite of products or services that we offer. And when we can actually reveal for ourselves and then share with our communities the meaning of that, everything you do and provide has so much more dimension and depth and meaning, because not only of what you do, but why you do it.
I want to transition to health and wellness. You are a health and wellness enthusiast outside of being involved in the space, but you also just love this space as well as I do. And we've talked a lot about, the cool stuff that's happening with science and, companies out there developing really cool products and services. And I wanted to talk to you and just get your insight on what's happening in the space, because you've seen a rise of wearables, you've seen a rise of, RTDs, kind of like, ready to drinks for people out there who don't know what that is, like the AG ones. And for someone like yourself that's been involved in this industry for quite some time, I've talked about AI on the podcast before with Ginger Luck. He works over at KPMG, talking about what AI is going to do to impact people's health, like what it's able to do in diagnosing medical conditions. And it's like really fascinating. And we can go down that route, but in your perspective, just being so close to founders that have ideas and concepts, really wanting to better people's wellness, what are you excited for that's happening in the health and wellness space? Is there any trends that you're currently seeing that's going to be on the rise in the marketplace very soon? Would love to just hear what's really excites you about the health and wellness industry.
As you pointed out, I mean, I'm known for more how to position these businesses and how to reveal their most authentic voices to grow and really be these beloved brands. And to your point, I see a lot of the products and what they do. And I'm a biology major, not a business major, so I'm very comfortable in the glossary and the vocabulary. What I love, Mike, is that, and we have a long way to go, but at the same time, we've made more than a dent in getting personalized medicine all the way down to one size fits one versus a one size fits all. Now, there are a lot of things, of course, thousands, if not millions, of supplements and, of course, a fair share of wearables and consumer health tech and things of that nature. Some of which measure, I mean, Aura Ring measures, it's not a therapeutic device. So there's a lot of things out there to measure what's going on in your body. But then to actually address what is going on in your body and getting that to one size fits one is very exciting. There's a field of practice that you're aware of and that, you listening, I'm sure you may have heard of this, called functional medicine, which essentially is the belief that physical and health challenges are best addressed by going upstream to the root cause. Yes, you can treat a symptom, take away the pain, and that's a blessing. But why is it happening? Let's see if we can get upstream to the root cause and sort of nip it there or prevent it there. And there's nowhere further upstream than you can go, Mike, let's say, than your genes or my genes. Because to my understanding, the genes that are, principally responsible for some of the major metabolic and endocrine functions, the way in which your hormones work, the way in which your body detoxifies, some of these kinds, the way in which your brain works. Some of these genes are not necessarily specifically present that are responsible for, let's say, a certain type of detoxification. And I don't mean from a drug or an alcohol, but just things that get into your body through food or through air or through breathing or through your sheets that you sleep on. These kinds of things enter our bodies through skin, through inhalation, through the mouth. And so the way in which your body detoxes, different people detox in different ways based on the way their genes are and whether a gene is absent, present, or even present and not fully engaged. As you know, in the area of epigenetics, we can trigger different gene expression just by the foods we either eat or avoid. So these kinds of things that enable us to really treat people in the most personalized way possible, which is not just, Mike, because I forget how old you are, but let's just, you're X age, you're X height, your eyes are this color. Therefore, we should treat you like every man that has those three things. So one size fits one and functional medicine, looking at root cause and looking at root cause for Mike, the human being, not Mike as as one type of man among millions, that's really exciting to me. And most people get blood work and it's 2 pages. Mine are like 75 pages. And they're not, and that can be overwhelming. But I'd rather know than not know. And a lot of these, and the last thing I'll say is that what used to cost literally hundreds of thousands of dollars, even 15 or 20 years ago, or even if it was possible. But some of the genetic profiling, the genomic profiles, as an example, were tens, and even before that, possible to do, but cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. Today, it's a few $100s. It's available. It's accessible to most people, and the democratizing, or meaning just the making available of these cutting edge methodologies. It's just so exciting. So the real key is much more so than, yes, we want to cure cancer and diabetes, and there are a lot of things we've yet to accomplish, but we've also accomplished and identified a lot in the area of methodology that is, economically feasible for people to avail themselves of.
I love the personalized medicine route, especially because some of my closest friends are in functional medicine, and the way that they're talking about really addressing symptoms and not sticking a Band-Aid onto it, but recognizing you are a one of one, and you have a different cardiovascular system than somebody else. It may be made the same way, but it reacts differently. And I think that understanding is really powerful in that as well. I just hope if I ever take one of those food tests, it doesn't tell me to get rid of pizza, or otherwise I'd be devastated. I think that'd be just such a tragic day for me and my Italian roots. But we'll save that for it. We'll hope that doesn't happen. Anyway, last question for you. And before I get into that, Michael, I just want to acknowledge you and honor you for coming on to the show today. And thank you so much for your time and your wisdom, as always. I think this was a very valuable conversation around brand, around messaging and relationship. And more importantly, just for people to start seeing how exciting it is going to be for more advancements in personalized medicine, and the role that technology could play in that as well. I think it's going to be really exciting. So I thank you, my friend, for joining. I really appreciate it. And as you know, we ask every single guest on this show what their personal definition is of living their truth. So, Michael, what is your definition of living your truth?
I knew that, but I forgot that was coming. But I'm happy to get into it. Just two things, Mike, and thank you for the question. Living your truth, I think, at least for me, and maybe this will resonate, for, let's say, you on the listening side, living your truth has to do with locating your purpose and doing things that are congruent with that, particularly in your livelihood, if, which hopefully is possible for everybody to be on purpose, to love what they do, and to feel that it is a meaningful contribution. I can make a case for the divinity of virtually any profession that doesn't hurt people. Everybody's out there helping somebody in some way. And so I think living your truth is partly it's about getting to your purpose and to the best of your ability, living in congruence with that and making choices that are in integrity with that. And the other part of living your truth is knowing who you are without layers of trauma or compensating for the things that either happened to us that were hurtful or didn't happen for us that were hurtful. Of course, we know some people have endured, terrible, terrible things. And for someone else, it could be, their parent was 5 minutes late picking them up at school. That doesn't sound tragic, but that's meaningful to that. It created a self-assessment in that moment. Am I lovable? Am I worthy? Am I deserving? So we know how the human brain works. You've heard me call it the factory settings. And so The other piece of living your truth, Mike, other than living in alignment, locating and living consistently with your purpose, is knowing who you are beneath all the ways in which you very naturally and very understandably are living in certain compensatory ways and compensating or kind of like managing. I mean, the way I heard it described one time is if you're dancing, you can dance with freedom and just kind of groove and just dance with freedom, or you can watch yourself dance. And if you watch yourself dance, it gets mechanical, right? It's not smooth. Most people live very understandably and 100% compassion. I mean, this is how our brains have us live. We want to prevent all those things, the hurtful things that either happened or didn't happen. We want to prevent those things from, happening again. And we also want to get through whatever our interpretations were about ourselves based on those events. And just know that we're deserving and know that we're worthy and know that we are amazing. Even though those things happen, it doesn't mean what we think it means about us. So living your truth is actually getting who you are pre-trauma, pre any of those disappointing or terrible things, and living, that truth, the truth before we took on layers of protection, which is a total 100% natural thing for a human being to do. But the real gift in life is to get beneath those layers of insulation and protection that we've taken on over the years and be that person. That's living your truth.
I love that. It reminds me so much of the work around the inner child work. Just really being able to just remember that at one point in time, no matter if you're 40, 50, 60 years old, or even 30 years old, you were an 8-year-old who thought you could fly, or you were a 10-year-old who thought you were going to break the world speed record.
Anyone listening to this is 100% qualified to do what I just described, no matter who you are, no matter how long you've been on the planet in human form. This is available to you.
Yes, I love that. And thank you, Michael, again for your friendship, most importantly, and also for your words of wisdom. I really appreciate it. And thank you for coming on to the show this week. And thanks to all of you for tuning into this week's episode of Live Your Truth Now. If you like what you heard, go ahead and give us a follow on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your audio podcast. You can also watch other episodes of the Live Your Truth Now podcast on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Mike Liguori. I will see you next week. Take care.